Everyone thinks they know who the most influential leaders in history are, but trust me, this list will challenge everything you thought you knew. Because when we talk about influence, we're not just talking about people with crowns, armies, or titles. We're talking about those rare individuals who bent history itself, who changed how we think, how we live, and even how we define power. This ranking isn't about who was the nicest or who ruled the biggest empire. It's about impact, the leaders whose actions echoed across centuries, whose decisions reshaped nations, and whose names became bigger than their lifetimes. Before we dive in, here's the challenge. Drop your prediction in the comments. Who do you think will take the #1 spot? Is it Washington? Caesar? Maybe someone whose influence you totally underestimated? Alright, get ready, because from here on out, we're counting down the 10 most influential leaders in all of human history. Let's go! Number 10, Winston Churchill, Bulldog of Britain. The man whose voice alone rallied a broken world. Winston Churchill is best known as the Prime Minister who led the United Kingdom through its darkest hour, World War II. When Hitler's armies swept across Europe and Britain stood alone, Churchill didn't flinch. His defiance, his speeches, and his sheer willpower gave people something priceless: hope. What people loved, his leadership style was raw and relentless. He spoke with fire when others whispered in fear. "We shall fight on the beaches." That wasn't just oratory. That was emotional armor for an entire nation. His refusal to surrender turned despair into defiance. Critics argue Churchill's legacy isn't without shadows. His imperial views, controversial decisions during the Bengal famine, and harsh opinions on colonized nations leave deep moral questions. To some, he's a hero. To others, a reminder of empire's arrogance. Unique twist. Here's something most people forget. Churchill won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953 not for politics, but for his words. His mastery of storytelling and history-making speeches literally earned him a place among great writers. That mix of courage, controversy, and charisma lands Winston Churchill at number 10, the man who proved that sometimes words can be as powerful as weapons. Number 9, Nelson Mandela. From prisoner to president, Nelson Mandela's life is one of the most remarkable transformations in modern history. What people love. He spent 27 years in a cell on Robben Island. 27 years of isolation, brutality, and silence, and yet, when he walked free, he preached forgiveness instead of vengeance. His leadership ended apartheid and gave birth to a new South Africa built on reconciliation. He became a global symbol of peace, integrity, and endurance, someone who showed that strength of spirit can defeat even the harshest system of oppression. Critics argue even Mandela's admirers admit his presidency wasn't flawless. South Africa faced massive economic inequality and crime. Some say his idealism couldn't always translate into policy, but those criticisms only highlight how enormous his moral legacy was, because he was never chasing perfection. He was chasing unity. Unique twist. Mandela refused to let fame define him. "I am not a saint," he said, "unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." That humility, that unbreakable humanity, made him more than a leader. It made him a mirror for what leadership should be. That's why Nelson Mandela stands at number 9, a man who conquered hate without ever lifting a sword. Number 8, Alexander the Great. Now let's turn back the clock to the 4th century BC and meet the original world conqueror, Alexander the Great. What people love. By the age of 30, he had built one of the largest empires in ancient history. Greece, Egypt, Persia, even parts of India, all under his command. His strategies changed warfare forever, and his ambition reshaped the ancient world. He didn't just win battles. He spread culture, language, and learning, the Hellenistic world that became the foundation for Western civilization. Critics argue Alexander's brilliance came with chaos. His empire was forged through endless conquest, and it shattered soon after his death. He was reckless, impulsive, and consumed by the idea of his own divinity. His dream outgrew the world around him. Unique twist. Here's the crazy part. Alexander never lost a single battle. Not one. Even centuries later, generals study his tactics at military academies. And when he died at just 32, his soldiers reportedly asked, "To whom shall we leave the empire?" His answer? To the strongest. Alexander's mix of genius and hubris earns him the number 8 spot, the boy king who tried to conquer not just nations, but eternity itself. Number 7, George Washington. From the thunder of ancient battlefields to the birth of a new nation, number 7 is America's own founding father, George Washington. What people love. Washington wasn't just a military hero. He was the moral compass of the revolution. He led a ragtag army against the world's mightiest empire and won. But his greatest act wasn't victory. It was restraint. When the war ended, Washington stepped away from power instead of seizing it. He could have been king, but he chose to be a citizen. That decision defined democracy. It showed the world that true leadership isn't about holding power, it's about knowing when to let go. Critics argue, of course, his legacy carries contradictions. Washington spoke of liberty while owning slaves. He fought for freedom within a system that denied it to millions. His image as the perfect patriot is complicated, and that's okay. History's real leaders are rarely flawless. Unique twist: when King George III heard that Washington had voluntarily resigned his command, he said, if he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world, and he was right. That humility, rare in any age, made Washington more than just a president. It made him the living symbol of American ideals. That balance of honor, contradiction, and vision secures George Washington at number 7. Number 6. Genghis Khan. You can't talk about world-changing leaders without mentioning the storm from the steppes. Genghis Khan, what people love. He united the Mongol tribes and built the largest contiguous empire in history, an empire that reshaped Asia, Europe, and trade itself. Genghis Khan's military organization was unmatched. He rewarded merit, not bloodline. He promoted religious freedom and created postal networks across continents centuries before modern communication. Critics argue, but make no mistake, his reign was ruthless. Cities burned, populations were wiped out, and entire civilizations were erased. His genius for governance was born from conquest, and his legacy carries both awe and horror. He wasn't a hero, he was a force of nature. Unique twist: here's the wildest fact. Modern genetic studies suggest that nearly 1 in every 200 men alive today carries his DNA. That's how vast his impact was: biological, cultural, and geopolitical. Love him or fear him, Genghis Khan shaped the medieval world in ways no one else did. That mix of brutal conquest and visionary rule earns him the number 6 spot. Quick pause: if you're still here, you clearly love rankings that stir debate and rewrite what we thought we knew about history. So hit that like button, subscribe, and join this community, because the top 5, that's where things get real. We're heading into the legends who didn't just command armies or nations, they commanded civilizations. Philosophers who ruled with ideas. Revolutionaries who built new worlds. And yes, a few figures whose names still spark arguments centuries later. Because coming up next are the true titans, the 5 leaders who didn't just influence their time, they defined it. Each of these next names didn't just rule people, they rewrote what leadership means. Let's dive in. Number 5. Julius Caesar. Power, betrayal, legacy. Few names in history strike such immediate recognition. Julius Caesar, who he was: the man who turned the Roman Republic into an empire. A general, statesman, and political genius whose name literally became a title, Caesar, that echoed for over 1,000 years. What people love: Caesar expanded Rome's reach across Europe, modernized its calendar, and built the foundations of governance that would define Western civilization. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a visionary. His bold reforms, land redistribution, central administration, and debt relief made him a hero to the common people. Critics argue, but his ambition shattered the republic. His hunger for power led to dictatorship and eventually his assassination. At 2, Brute became the most famous betrayal in human history. Caesar's story is a warning as much as a triumph. Even the greatest leader can fall to his own ambition. Unique twist: here's a detail most people miss. After his death, Rome worshipped him as a god, a literal deity, and every emperor after him claimed descent or divine favor from Caesar himself. That mix of brilliance, arrogance, and immortality lands Julius Caesar firmly at number 5, the man who proved that one life can redefine an empire. Number 4. Abraham Lincoln. From marble halls to log cabins, number 4 belongs to the man who held America together when it was tearing itself apart. Abraham Lincoln, who he was: the 16th President of the United States, a self-educated lawyer from the frontier who rose to become the conscience of a nation in crisis. What people love: Lincoln's leadership during the Civil War saved the Union. His Emancipation Proclamation turned a battle over territory into a battle for freedom. He spoke not with fury but with humanity, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. That line still defines democracy. Critics argue, some say Lincoln was slow to act on slavery, that his policies were politically calculated. Others debate how much he truly cared about racial equality versus preserving the Union. But no one disputes his courage to make the hardest decisions when the stakes were everything. Unique twist: Lincoln had prophetic dreams of his own death just days before his assassination, a haunting truth that adds to his almost mythic story. And his leadership through humility remains unmatched. He once said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." That wisdom and sacrifice earned Lincoln his place at number 4, the leader who led with both strength and soul. Number 3. Mahatma Gandhi. Down to the top 3. And now we meet the man who led without weapons. Number 3. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, better known to the world as Mahatma, the great soul. Who he was: a lawyer, philosopher, and revolutionary who led India's independence movement through nonviolence. His idea of satyagraha, resistance through truth, changed the course of global politics. What people love: Gandhi proved that you could fight an empire without firing a shot. His marches, fasts, and protests awakened the conscience of millions and inspired figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. He turned moral conviction into a weapon stronger than any army, critics argue, but Gandhi was human and controversial. His views on race, gender, and religion were complex and sometimes outdated. His personal experiments and contradictions make him a difficult figure to categorize. Yet his method, peaceful resistance, became a global blueprint for justice. Unique twist: Gandhi was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times but never won. The committee later admitted that omission was one of its greatest regrets. That mix of philosophy, morality, and quiet revolution puts Gandhi at number 3, a man who showed the world that true power lies not in domination, but in discipline. Transition. And now we enter the final two leaders whose names still command awe. One united half the planet through empire and ideology, the other through freedom and vision. The last two aren't just historical figures, they're forces of nature. Number 2, Napoleon Bonaparte was called the Little Corporal, but his ambition was anything but small. Number 2, Napoleon Bonaparte. Who he was: a military prodigy who rose from obscurity to become Emperor of France. Napoleon reshaped Europe in his own image. His rise from a poor Corsican soldier to the master of continental Europe is the ultimate story of power, strategy, and intellect. What people love: Napoleon revolutionized warfare, education, and law. His Napoleonic Code still forms the foundation of many modern legal systems. He built merit-based governance, expanded infrastructure, and made France the cultural and political heart of the 19th century. He turned chaos into order, critics argue, but his thirst for dominance dragged Europe into endless wars, costing millions of lives. His ego blinded him from the invasion of Russia to the final defeat at Waterloo. For some, he's a genius. For others, a tyrant who mistook conquest for destiny. Unique twist: even in exile, Napoleon's shadow loomed large. Historians estimate more books have been written about him than any other person except Jesus Christ. Love him or hate him, Napoleon made history personal. That mix of brilliance and destruction earns Napoleon the number 2 spot, the man who tried to crown himself ruler of the modern world. Number 1, Jesus Christ. And finally, number 1, the single most influential figure in human history, Jesus of Nazareth. Who he was: a preacher from a small Roman province who never held political office, commanded an army, or wrote a book, yet changed the course of civilization more than any conqueror ever could. What people love: his message of compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love became the foundation of Christianity, a faith followed by over 2 billion people today. His teachings influenced philosophy, art, law, and ethics across centuries. Whether you're religious or not, his impact is undeniable. He reshaped the moral framework of the world, critics argue, from a historical standpoint. Skeptics debate the interpretations of his life and miracles. Over time, his message has been used and misused by empires, institutions, and politics. But the fact remains, his words outlived kingdoms, emperors, and entire civilizations. Unique twist: every year, the world divides time itself around his birth, BC and AD. That's not just influence. That's omnipresence in history's very timeline. That's why Jesus Christ takes the number 1 spot, not just as a religious figure, but as the most transformative leader the world has ever known. His leadership transcended politics, power, and mortality. That's a mic drop moment, and that's the full countdown, the top 10 most influential leaders in history. Let's recap. 10. Winston Churchill, the voice of defiance. 9. Nelson Mandela, the spirit of forgiveness. 8. Alexander the Great, the young conqueror. 7. George Washington, the father of a new nation. 6. Genghis Khan, the unstoppable empire builder. 5. Julius Caesar, the mind that turned republic to empire. 4. Abraham Lincoln, the savior of the Union. 3. Mahatma Gandhi, the force of peace. 2. Napoleon Bonaparte, the genius of ambition. Jesus Christ, the eternal leader of hearts and minds. But now it's your turn. Did your favorite make the list? Who did we rank too high or too low? Would you replace Caesar with Cleopatra or swap Napoleon for Lincoln? Let's spark that debate in the comments below. And if you love rankings that make you think, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because from world leaders to artists, inventions, and civilizations, if it's worth debating, we're going to rank it. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep questioning, keep debating, and keep learning. Until next time, stay legendary.